To use shading techniques in your Zen doodle art, first we'll start by doing a quick recap. So the purpose of shading in your art would be to convey form, or the shape of something, value, how light or dark some sections are, or perhaps some textures, how smooth or rough things can look. And you can do this through many different mark makings, but the basic ones would be hatching, just straight vertical lines, grouped close to make it look darker, grouped further apart to make it look lighter. Line weight, hatching or applied to anything else really, the darker it is, the darker it looks, and the thinner and more spaced out they are, the lighter it looks. Then you have cross hatching, which is just hatching lines superimposed on top of one another in any direction. Tighter for darker, looser for lighter. Stippling, lots of dots. Same concept, a lot closer together, darker, less closer together, lighter. Scribbling, and yeah, so let's get started with that. So I sectioned this off a little bit to save a bit of time here. So let's say you want to make some doodles into this template here. Let's say we draw some circles in here. Now let's see, we want to give depth to these holes. Maybe, they go somewhere. Add a line in here. And since we want the bottom of the hole to be dark, we would just color in the whole thing here. And then, obviously, in that hole, this little section here would probably not be the same value or light or darkness as the surface. So this is where you could use something like hatching to just draw some lines down here to make it look a bit darker than the surface, but not as dark as that hole in the bottom. Another thing we can do with this is convey a sense of dropping down depth. So let's say we wanted this panel here to make it look like it was lower in relation to this here. Like we had this crater on top of these mountains and then this was coming down a little bit. We could add an extra line here to follow. And then do hatching lines down to create that distinction. And if you wanted to add more contrast to that, you can do another set of hatching lines. Maybe not go all the way down, kind of stop in the middle, and it'll make it look like it's darker on the top. And down here you would have your floor. And let's say you wanted each of these things to look like its own raised tile. You can also add along two edges tiny little hatching to make it look like it's popping up a little bit. Yeah, that's the idea. It makes it look a little more raised. Let's say you wanted to add some sort of hill to the background here. You could add hatching lines following the form of what that hill might be. Hills are usually round. I think I failed a little bit here. Some of them are a little bit too straight. And then you can re-emphasize that on the other side if you just follow your lines without continuing them in the middle. Maybe that's some kind of convex form that's sticking out. Yeah, and these are just to add interest to your sections. These can be effectively your doodles. They can accent your doodles. Like let's say I make this ribbon pattern I have in one of my videos here. Like some of these patterns have this level of shading already built in, especially the geometric ones. So in this pattern, I've got this that's darkened under here. So this could suggest a shadow that's underneath this ribbon, as if it's raised in the air. Okay, so the pattern itself has that shadow and these lines built into it. Okay, so that's how the pattern is at its base. If you wanted to amplify this, like add a light source, let's say coming from this way, you could draw shadows coming along here, and that's just a simple hatching line in a kind of an S pattern following that curve. And you could do that with just the single line of hatching. You could do that with the stippling, and around here would be darker than the tops, so you can double down with a little more lines, or stippling with dots closer together, or scribbling with dots closer, with the lines closer together. And if you wanted to add even more depth and suggest that this shadow looms a little more, you could add even more hatching underneath there. I see it extends that shadow and gives it even more dynamic interest. And you can apply this method to any other shapes. Let's say you wanted to draw some buttons. Okay, you have your circles here. And the way you perceive this too might be opposite depending on how your eyes are focused. I see them this way, and then I get confused if I look at them too long. So let's say we want some buttons here. We can just do a little shadow here and make that dark so that it conveys that it's the side. And then what we can do is add some hatching lines to the background to suggest that that wall is further down than the button, which is the lightest part. And I mean, this makes its own pattern. You can make tons of patterns with just hatching lines and line weight. So one way you can see this is either a button coming out of a wall or kind of a hole going into a wall. I see it as both depending on how I focus my eyes. It can be a neat little optical illusion there you can throw into your designs if you wanted to. And you could also do the opposite. And this time you can put the hatching lines in here. And to me, I see this as more of a hole in the wall than the other one. But maybe it's just darker in that hole instead of brighter than the wall. So here I've got these stair patterns. So let's say the light's coming from the top, and this is the top of your stair here. So this is going to be lighter than the side of your stair, but you don't want to just leave this all white and leave this all dark. Okay, it would defeat the purpose of having this pattern here in the first place. So for your lighter one, you could choose to have, so let's say this row is lighter than that row, and this row is lighter than that row, and that makes your pattern. And because you have a different value on the bottom than on the top, it's going to change how you shade it. So let's say your top step is lighter, but this one is darker in color than this one, and this one's darker than this one, and etc. So full light on top, this is the color of that one. You leave this one white. Full light, this is the value of this one. Leave that one white. Whoops. And you do the same thing on all your top steps. Okay, so this row is darker in value than this. This one might be dark gray, this one might be light gray. Now, since this second row here, that's the flat end going like this of the stairs, is going to be darker. This one needs to be darker than this one, but this time this one won't stay white. We can maybe have it similar in value to this up here. So we can do our basic hatching here. And for this one, we want to make it darker, so we can either do some cross hatching or just color it in black completely if you don't want to get confused between where you're hatching and cross hatching. Or I would suggest doing all the cross hatching first so you don't accidentally cross into your lighter one here. You got to make sure your lines are close enough together so that it does look darker than what's on top of it. And you want to keep your lines in the same general direction as your guiding line, otherwise it's going to look a little strange. And then you can do your hatching lines here for your lighter row of steps. So there you have it. You have your your light source row with a darker step and a lighter step, and then you have your shadowed row with a darker step and a lighter step. So that's another way you can use shading in your doodles. Let's say we made this worm pattern, and then you wanted to emphasize the shading on this even more. So now we have these lines convey form for us, but we can magnify that. And again, make sure you keep within the same direction that your lines are going, or it's gonna look a little weird. You can just add some hatching down here like this, and that helps to add depth to your form. You can take it a little further and bring some lighter strokes up further than this. You can add more towards the bottom, like here, to make it even darker. And you know, if the light was really coming from this way, you could eliminate this one here altogether and make this one reach even higher on this side here. Like, okay, I didn't do this here. So let's say the light is shooting here. You could, it's gonna look a little weird now because I have both on it, but you could extend this. So if I hide this one here, it'll be a little more obvious that the light is coming from the right side here, and you would just put your darker lines here like that. So that's a couple of ways to use that for this. I kind of like that one actually. And if you wanted to take it a step even further, let's say these segments have an extra dimension to them, like they come inside as well as out, then you can start putting lines like this. Try to make them rounded a little bit to the shape. You can sort of scribble a little over it to make that deep part look darker, and you could do that same thing with stippling. Essentially, if you find any section of your doodle that can have form that could be raised up or down, and you want to add more depth to it, you'd add little clusters of concentrated marks, be it the lines, the dots, the scribbles, to the parts that would be darker or deeper. So here I'm suggesting with these that the edges are deeper and that this object is convex, meaning it comes up. It goes up instead of inward. Conversely, if this was convex, you would be adding your shadows in the center here, but at the same time you would have maybe made your other lines, your worm lines here, go this way instead of up like this. This could also be considered convex, facing up, but this shape would be moving towards you rather than away from you, and it's a little less obvious, so it would be easier to convey this as concave rather than convex. So if you added your lines to the middle like this, and then sort of, this is scribble territory. I think it looks a bit strange because I have the concave ones the convex ones next to it, the ones that go up. So if I block this, you can see more that looks more like it sloops down than up because our shadows are moving in. You can do the same thing with the stippling. Kind of like that. So let's say your doodle was an actual object, like you have, let's say you have these petals here or leaves, sort of plant thing, and this little crown tulip on top here, let's say. Okay, these are all clustered towards the center, so it would make sense that they would be darker than the leaves on the outside that actually receive more light. So then you can start using here hatching lines. These are probably all things that you have been doing instinctively or that have been included in the patterns, but maybe you weren't quite sure why. Well, we got the stem here. But once you understand the function of conveying form, value, and texture, it makes it a lot easier to choose where to put what lines or what to shade and what not to shade. You can use lines sparingly. They don't have to be in a complete cluster like this. Makes it look a little more sketchy. If that's not the look you're going for, then that's perfectly fine. The idea is just to understand why maybe sometimes you're not happy with your piece if it looks too flat and you're not sure what to do about it. You could play around with adding these suggestions of depth to your piece. There you go. That's a little more interesting than just a flat. There's also nothing wrong with flat patterns. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You could just fill these leaves with yet another pattern and keep going with a pattern and a pattern and a pattern if that's your jam. Say we have a little path here. So this could be anything. This could just be a line. Using these can also add depth here. So if you go down here, add this, continue here. Now maybe what you have is a wall rather than just a line. And these lines show that there's height or depth there. Those are all things you can play with. And then of course you could use it to actually shade a doodle. Let's say we have a little mushroom here. Got their little furry stem here, and then we have, under the mushroom here would be the darkest, obviously, so we would color that in. And then maybe we want to make it look round. So we draw our little round lines that show the form. You always want to follow the form of the object you're shading. Your mushroom goes like this. You don't want to just make straight lines. It's going to make it look super flat. So, and then up curvy lines like this, and then change the curve to where it goes. And maybe there's a little bit of a shadow here as well. So that's how you can convincingly shade even your doodle elements if you didn't want to keep them completely flat. So yeah, those are some simple ways you can use pen and ink shading, extremely basic pen and ink shading, to elevate your doodles a little bit if you were wanting to break free of things looking a little flat. Obviously take your time and draw the lines where they need to be. The direction of the line is everything. It needs to follow the form, otherwise it's going to look a little strange. But it's something that's easy to practice. You can just draw any kind of shape and try out putting some lines on top of it and see what happens. I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments if this in any way helped you to try something new and what you thought about that. So thank you for watching, and start now. You can do it.